Hi there, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to give folks just a minute to join us here and let folks trickle in from the waiting room. So in the meantime, I will continue to kind of fill the air here. If you would benefit today from closed captions, you can find those under the Zoom controls menu. You can enable closed captions for yourself, and I will be right here, fill in the air while we give folks just a minute to get started. Um, it's a beautiful day outside in California. I don't know where everyone is calling in from, but really excited to be spending some time with you today. We're going to let folks trickle in from the waiting room, and then we will be getting started soon. I will give us about 30 more seconds before we dive right in. When I see my clock strike 12:16, I will go ahead and get us started. Um, Alrighty. Let's go ahead and dive in. Hello, everybody. My name is Brinton from Team Handshake. I am so excited to welcome you today for this session that we will get into very shortly. I just want to level set a little bit. My name is Brinton, pronouns she, her. I am a white female with chin length brunette hair, and I am wearing a beige blouse today. Really excited to be here with you. A couple of quick notes before we get started on this panel. We're going to have about 30 minutes of structured discussion today about navigating fall recruitment with a disability. We'll save about 10 minutes at the end for questions from you, the audience. So feel free to submit any questions using the Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer some of those live before we end today. We also have somebody from Lyme Connect on the back end who will be answering questions in the Q&A box as well throughout the session. So feel free to ask any questions there anytime throughout. You can enable closed captioning during this session by clicking the Show Captions icon in your meeting controls toolbar. We're also recording this session and we'll be making it available to everyone following this event on our YouTube channel and our Handshake blog, where we will also include links to any of the resources that we discussed today. So with that, I'm thrilled to get us started. I'm really, really excited to be here today because as somebody with a mental health condition, I know I could have benefited from helpful advice and resources like Lyme Connect when I was in school to help me make informed decisions around my career path and my job search. And now as co-lead of Handshake's employee resource group for folks with mental health conditions and neurodiverse handshakers, I often hear firsthand from folks about challenges that they have had in their career journeys. And so it's a real privilege for me to be in a position today to facilitate conversations like this one and help others as they navigate their own journeys in their careers. Please note before we get started that none of what we cover today is legal advice. You should absolutely consult with your school's career center, a lawyer, or your school's disability services center for specific personalized guidance. That's just a quick caveat, and I'll make it again at some point throughout this session as well. But with that out of the way, Alyssa, I would love it if you could introduce yourself and give us a bit of background on Lyme Connect.
Sure. Thanks so much, Brenton. It's great to be back. We've worked with Handshake previously and are part of the Handshake community. So we love to share resources and talk about these topics. My name is Alyssa Brower. I'm the Senior Engagement Manager at Lyme Connect. As a visual description, I have under the shoulder length light brown hair. I'm a white woman. I'm wearing a blue shirt today. And I also go by she, her pronouns. For those who are not aware of Lyme Connect or less familiar with us, we are a nonprofit organization that's focused on rebranding disability through achievement. So we work with university students and professionals with all types of disabilities, visible, non-visible, obvious, non-obvious, to build a community as our Lyme network. And our Lyme network is a community of peers with shared experiences. You can develop connections for professional development, gain access to career tools to build your skills, and then ultimately build confidence as you navigate the workplace as a person with a disability. So that's kind of high level what we do. You're welcome to join the Lyme community. It is free to join, whether you are a person who identifies as a disability, if you want to be a friend of Lyme. We also have access for university partners. So there's a community for everyone with us.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Alyssa. I think before we get into the bulk of the session today, I would love to do some level setting. I know that over a fifth of US undergraduates report a disability, but there are often some who are navigating their academic and professional journeys without disclosing a disability. Can you share some of the more common concerns or questions that you receive from job seekers during recruitment season? I know fall is peak recruitment time, lots of career fairs, lots of new jobs being listed on Handshake, and lots of things to navigate that you might not have navigated before.
Absolutely. And I think, first of all, welcome to the semester or quarter to university students, whether it's your very first semester as a first year student or your first semester as a senior. There are a lot of different things and there's a lot of excitement around this time. But yes, the career path starts to develop now. So things may look different from when you were growing up and had different accommodations throughout your K through 12 schooling. Or there may be times now where you're starting to acquire a diagnosis or a disability. My own disability was not evident to me, although it had manifested in various ways throughout my life. It was not clear to me until I got to college. And this major shift was happening in my life. So that's all to say that there are people on various parts of their disability journey, but when it comes to looking for an employer or potentially going into the recruitment process, there is a fear of negative reaction or perception of you and your capabilities, especially if that's something you've experienced previously. Perhaps there's a fear of this going on some kind of permanent record within the company. So you're not quite sure who actually is knowledgeable of this information. Perhaps you don't want the entire company to know about your disability, which is well within your right. Or there may just be the question of, well, I do have a disability. I may need to receive an accommodation. What should that accommodation look like in the workplace, and who's the best person to go to? So those are certainly questions that come about throughout the process. And we as Lyme Connect are not an organization that says you absolutely have to disclose if you have a known disability. We come from the background of it is totally a personal choice. You should do so when you're comfortable. However, if it will make you successful throughout the recruitment process or throughout your employment, then we definitely encourage you to do so. And there's a lot of different supports out there that can inform that decision.
Yeah, and I think that leads us very well into our next question. And I'm also going to go ahead and share a slide that you provided ahead of time, talking a little bit about, making informed decisions around disclosures throughout the process. But I imagine that one of the biggest challenges for folks just getting started in the process of exploring that early career opportunity in the recruitment is getting what they need to succeed during these early stages. Can you share a little bit about, you talked about considering whether or not you need accommodations during the process, the kind of things that are might be on one's mind as you consider whether, when, and how to disclose a disability in that process. So I wanted to share the slide that you and the Lyme team have put together and give you some space to talk about that process.
Thank you. Yeah. So the first thing I always like to highlight is the difference between self ID and self disclosure. So I feel like practically everyone is applying to roles online these days. Um, so you'll be on the website and fill out all of the different questions that they ask, and you get to the demographic section that asks about race, ethnicity, gender, veteran status, and then there's the question about disability. So you can select, I'm a person with a disability, I do not have a disability, prefer not to disclose. Many people think if they select prefer not to disclose, then they're basically saying yes. So that box is a self ID box. Now, that information, according to the corporate partners that we work with, and just full disclosure, we work with large global corporate partners. They tell us that that is just a data point that they utilize for their reporting to understand the profile of applicants coming in and applying to their different roles. Sometimes if they have to do federal reporting, then they obviously utilize that data for that. However, the folks who would be you'd be talking to as a recruiter, who would be conducting your interviews, someone who would be ultimately your manager or on your team, they would not necessarily know that because it's just self-ID. Disclosure comes when you have a conversation with someone, whether it is through asking for an accommodation or just having a conversation around your disability experience. So I always like to highlight that on the top level. But disclosure can happen at a very early stage. So while the application itself may not be self-disclosure, if you do submit a cover letter, I know that's becoming less and less common these days, but if you do submit a cover letter and you include that piece of you in your story, then that could be part of disclosure. Maybe if you include in your resume that you're a member of the Disabled Student Alliance or some group on campus, then one may make that assumption that you are someone with a disability. So those are kind of passive ways to disclose, so to speak, rather than having the conversation. But that could be the first point in which you may disclose. Another popular time is before an interview. So something I like to highlight is these days, depending on the size of the company, I would say with larger companies, but even smaller ones, many of the first stages of interviews are some kind of recorded assessment or interview. And many of those platforms do have built-in accommodations. So if you're someone who receives extra time for exams in school for your testing, you might want to consider asking for extra time on these recorded assessments so that you have the appropriate amount of time to put your thoughts together and answer the question fully. It may be also if you're thinking about accommodations for an in-person interview, it's just good to ask the detail of what is to be expected from an interview, both for the virtual and for in-person. That's how you can understand the details and what you may be able to ask for in the accommodation process. Of course, if you're going in person, all buildings should be ADA compliant, but there are definitely some strange setups. I've been to some in New York where, you know, elevators will go to every other floor. And if you need to utilize an elevator to go to the level that you need to be at, if your interview room was in some place that wasn't accommodating or accessible, then now we're spending time trying to navigate to a room to get to the interview rather than just starting the interview. So those are just some things to think through prior to the interview itself. You might decide to disclose during the interview because it comes up in conversation. You feel really comfortable with the person interviewing you. Maybe it comes up in a story that you have. So that is a time, not often, but that's also a time that it may come up. And then many folks do, if you didn't need an accommodation throughout the process, they do wait until they've received that offer. Now, there is this kind of gray area where there may be an offer pending a drug test. I would speak with your doctor if you're taking any medications, and you can really just work with your doctor and the lab running the test in case your medication comes up as a marker for something else for some reason on that test. You don't want to quote unquote fail a drug test just because you're taking a certain medication. But otherwise, if you already understand the role and you know what's expected of the day-to-day process, perhaps you know what to ask for, whether it be sitting in a distraction-free area, utilizing noise-canceling headphones, having a flexible schedule so you can go to therapy appointments. Those are all of the different pieces that might come up and when you might disclose. And it also might be well after once you're employed. . . 。  . 。 . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . .
I'm muted. You would think I would catch these things at this
Happens to
point.
the best of us.
Uh, I really appreciate you walking through that, and I know, it's a complex kind of series of decisions about whether, when, and how to disclose, but I think that's a really good overview of kind of the opportunities that one might have. And as you mentioned, oftentimes a disability journey is just that. It's a journey of
Mhm.
diagnosis, of discovery, of treatment, of kind of all the different levels of things that might change and ebb and flow over the course of your career path. So your needs might change over after receiving a job or after being on the job for a little while. I know that was the case for myself. And so thank you for talking through that, Alyssa.
Mhm.
I would love to dig into, you mentioned that Lime Connect works with a lot of large corporate partners. And, obviously the fact that these corporate partners are partnering with Lime Connect is a pretty good indicator that they foster inclusive environments for folks with disabilities. But I'd love to talk more broadly about thinking through career options in this kind of fall recruiting landscape. A lot of students are thinking through whether or not a company is going to be a good fit for them or might meet their needs or respect their individual needs. Are there any what I would call green flags that folks can look for that can help identify a workplace's commitment to inclusivity?
Yeah, and I think to your point, it will vary depending on how large the company is, how many resources they do have available. So if it is a larger company, then I would say you can look on their website, see if they do have a DEI focus, a page that may highlight some of the initiatives that they have and what they value. Brenton made mention of being part of the employee resource group at Handshake. I think that's a really great indicator of making space for employees who may identify or are interested in various affinities. So for college students, I feel like I didn't know what an ERG, employee resource group, was before I started working more in the corporate space. So what I compare it to is kind of like a student organization at a company. So it may be based on identity, it may be based on interest, as I mentioned, but it's a space where just employees of the company, it doesn't matter if you're on the same team, it doesn't matter what function area you work in, it's just a space for folks to come together and either can affect some changes within the company itself or come together for various events and learnings. So if they have an ERG dedicated to people with disabilities and caregivers, I think that's a good place to look. Even if they don't have a disabled employee group, but they have others, they may be potentially building those groups. So I think the existence of ERGs is good. They're on the right path. um, and then I would say, you can also look into, are there positive stories out in the public about these companies? Again, that will happen more for larger companies, or are there negative stories out there that may not really showcase the values that you want to share with that company? For smaller organizations, look at what they're posting on social media. What are they posting about on LinkedIn? What types of things are they celebrating? What kind of topics are they talking about? I think you can see a lot from activity around there. And then, of course, as you're in the recruitment process, if that information doesn't really exist in a searchable way, you can start having conversations with recruiters and interviewers about the values of the company, um, you know, get a sense of what their company culture is like, and hopefully that will give you those green flags that you're looking for.
Yeah, I love those thoughts, particularly the ERG and the existence of employee resource groups, even if there's one that's not necessarily apples to apples focused on ability. For example, in a company that's the size of Handshake, when I joined Handshake, I was hire 100 and something. We had a handful of ERGs, but you really only have ERGs based on employee interest and somebody who's there to facilitate this employee resource group. And so as new folks join the team, as needs arise, as you kind of expand your team, oftentimes space is made for those groups as desires are expressed from the team as the company grows. So I know that was the situation for my ERG, mental inclusivity and neurodiversity mind at Handshake. One of the things I'm proudest of having worked here is kind of co-founding and leading that community. So I would say that the ERG ecosystem is a really positive indicator of an inclusive company culture. So really appreciate you making space for that, Alyssa. One more caveat that I will make from the Handshake perspective, as you mentioned, posts on social media, posts from employers, big and small, can be really good indicators of a company's culture and attitude toward, the inclusivity generally. And I think the Handshake feed, folks who are on the line are probably on the Handshake feed already, but there are lots of employers of kind of ranged in sizes who are posting on the feed, and it gives a really good idea of the company culture, the company's values, and it's a really great starting point for evaluating some of these things and looking for those green flags among employers.
Mhm.
With that said, I'd love to dig in a little bit to not only from the company standpoint, as you mentioned, Alyssa, all of these green flags that you can look for in a company. But once you've determined that an organization itself is a good fit for you, how can folks on the line determine if a specific role feels like a good fit? Do you have any kind of guidance for assessing whether or not a specific role or job opportunity might meet your needs?
Yeah, I also think that the job description can, in and of itself, be a green flag. So if a company is posting a lot of detail within a job description and they are mindful of, what types of physical needs there may be, such as sitting for prolonged periods of time, lifting X amount of weight, travel, and things like that. I think that also shows that they understand that they need to give the candidate a full picture of what's required. So that's super helpful when the detail is there. Um, I would also say another green flag, and then this is kind of just general, it's not necessarily matching skills, but just generally speaking on those job descriptions for you, looking out for the benefits and the values that they list. So what's their leave policy? What types of perks do they offer? Will that be something that's beneficial to you? I have a mental health condition as well, so counseling is always something that I look for, but I'm also a parent. So if a company is valuing parental leave, I know that that won't come across as a burden to the company. That's just demonstrating to me that this may be a good fit. um, but I would say in terms of the actual roles, think of the skill sets that you have, and I think, think very deeply about those. What are you good at? What types of capabilities do you have? Because there are network members of ours who would have dreams of having going into a specific field. So for example, one of our network members who became a fellow, our fellowship program is a program for rising juniors in university who are really working towards that key internship following summer. Um, he for sure had his heart set on being on the trading room floor. Like he wanted to be in the thick of everything. He wanted to, really put boots to the ground on Wall Street. But then after talking to one of our partners, he realized that with his ADHD, that might not actually be the right fit for him. That might not be the best environment for him to go into. So he took an internship with that company and worked in sales and trading. So he was along that same um, path, but in a different environment, and he really thrived. So I would say, think about what the day to day is like. That is something that you'll capture more from conversation with recruiters. I think that's a great question to ask, like what's the expectation of a standard workday? And then you can kind of understand, is that something that fits with how I best operate? So I know that was a really general response, but I think that it really is dependent on what you'd like your day to day to look like, and then what, of course, those skill sets, how they align.
Hi, so sorry about that. My internet completely dropped. I can't tell if it was my Zoom or just me, but I so appreciate you sharing that example, Alyssa. Is everything looking okay now?
Yes,
Truly
you're
occup
okay.
occupational hazard of running live events. Sorry about that.
You're
Um,
good.
Awesome. Well, okay, I know that one of the things that is probably on a lot of folks' minds is during fall recruitment, there are a ton of career fairs, networking events, interviews. Do you have any advice for specific questions one might ask to gauge if a position is in somebody's wheelhouse, or get a really good sense for the role or application process during one of these events?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's important to be honest with yourself of how you will be able to perform. And also, I will say there's a lot that through my own personal experience, there's a lot you don't necessarily know until you're on the job. So try not to put too much pressure on yourself to understand everything all at the forefront. Like I never had migraines prior to working in a specific office setting, and it is something that I acquired in my 20s, and I actually am dealing with one today. So it's something that I realize is something I need to pay attention to, and I now know how to accommodate for. But that's just an example of like it's okay to not know everything right in the beginning, but just understand, what those needs may be. How do you work best? Is sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day conducive to the way that you learn? Do you need movement in your day? Do you need to be more hands-on with the type of work that you do? So I think that it's really important to kind of understand those pieces, but also from the employer's side, how much training do they provide? Do they have several large companies do have rotational programs, and it won't be for an internship, but it would be for like an entry level role where you can actually um, feel out different function areas. So then you can work on different teams throughout a given year and really understand like how you best work. Is it in I'm thinking of one of our partners, like, is it within the manufacturing space? Is it within the marketing space? So asking about those types of opportunities to learn and grow and really feel what's your best fit is just a recommendation I would have, kind of generally speaking.
Thank you for that. And I think that one of the topics that comes up a lot when I chat with students about the job search period is networking. And
Mhm.
during peak recruitment season, networking is a huge part of that process and a factor in it can be a factor into getting hired.
Yep.
Do you have any tips for navigating networking situations and getting the most out of networking events?
Yes, absolutely. So networking for some people is amazing. They are extroverted, they love small talk, they love meeting new people, and that's fantastic. For other people, it feels like a necessary evil. So I want to just acknowledge that that is something that not everybody loves the idea of networking, but I'm here to tell you networking can look different in different capacities. So again, I have a mental health condition, I have anxiety. When I was a college student, I remember those huge career fairs. I would walk into them, do a loop, maybe talk to one or two companies, and walk out because I was overwhelmed by the setup. Um, so yes, those career fairs exist. For some people, they're great. And it's a really great opportunity to meet a lot of different companies. But if you are someone who does not thrive in that environment, potentially you get overwhelmed or overstimulated, there are alternative events. Now, whether it's at your school, maybe through Handshake, you see some of these events that are more diversity hiring event focused. Those are generally smaller because they're capturing a specific audience. So that can be something that you look for. Also, given our digital world, we're in it right now. So many virtual events exist now. Lime Connect, we actually are having one like right after this call ends. We're having a virtual recruitment reception in the US. And we, before the pandemic, we would only do in person. So, of course, during the pandemic and lockdown, we had to shift to virtual, but now we continue to have them because they're so accessible to so many people. So a virtual recruiting event could be something that is a bit more, feels a bit more accessible to you. Perhaps you utilize equipment that is helpful to have with you, whether it's a screen reader or just the ergonomic setup of your desk at home. Just physically, you're able to join better. Virtual events are great for that. So I would say look into that. Shameless plug. If you join the Lyme community, we also have a webinar on networking on our community platform. But whether it's virtual or in person, also look out for the accommodations that can exist within those events. So it's becoming more popular to have kind of like quiet rooms where folks can decompress in case there's overstimulation. You can request any kind of paper materials to be given to you digitally ahead of time. That's usually through career services, or even having someone join you to guide you around the space can be super helpful. And again, for virtual, it could be utilizing captions, it could be a variety of different things. So definitely keep your eye out for that. But please do join these events in some way, because building relationships is so important and something that companies know. They see if you're someone who joins various events that they're putting on. It's a good way to learn about company culture because you can be speaking to different representatives from the company and really gauge, is everyone saying the same thing, or am I getting different stories with every person I talk to? And then a lot of companies also have talent forums that you can join. So even if they don't have a role available for you now, you can join it as a pipeline for applications in the future. So again, if you're someone who feels like networking is super intimidating, but a necessary evil, just know that there's a lot of different opportunities out there, and it is really important to do, because you may learn about opportunities that you wouldn't have known about if you were just doing a web search.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alyssa. And we have had so many great questions come in through the chat. I know we have Evelyn from Lyme Connect on the back end who's been answering some of these questions in writing, but I want to make space for live Q&A here to get through some of these. So reminder to anybody on the line, feel free to use that Q&A box to submit questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can in the next 12-ish minutes. But I'd love to start off, and you touched on this briefly earlier in the session, Alyssa, but most folks who are applying online are probably wondering, does clicking the disability self-identification checkbox count as disclosure? And should I use it or should I not?
Yeah, that's a great question. It does not count as disclosure. It should not be shared. Again, this is coming from the corporate partners that we work with. So of course, every human resources system is different, but according to our partners, that information would not be seen by your recruiter, interviewer, or manager. So if you wanted those people to know, or you need to ask for an accommodation, then you should certainly have that direct conversation. And also understand that if you disclose to one person, it doesn't mean that everybody else has heard that story. So you may need to do it multiple times. Now, it is totally your choice if you do want to check the box. It shouldn't be marked against you. It's not as if, like, I know some people worry, if I don't check the box, does that mean if I disclose later or ask for an accommodation after the fact, will I be reprimanded in any way? And no. As I mentioned before, like, there are times when disabilities are acquired or new symptoms come up. I know, and sometimes you don't know that until you start working in the environment. I remember one of my first jobs in New York, I had discovered, like I said, these migraines that came on because of the type of the office structure that I had. So I learned that I need to be near natural light. That's why you might see me gazing outside every once in a while, because as I shared, I am battling a migraine today. Um, so these things do come up, and like life happens. So it's totally okay to not disclose. It's not as if it will be marked against you. But as soon as you do think that it might be beneficial, then I would recommend doing so. And at Lyme, we have a career coach on staff that you can schedule an appointment with. Everything we do is free to our network members. So we also say, always work with your entire tool belt. So that's, the resources you have at career services, at disability and accessibility services. Lyme Connect is here as a resource, other external networks. But, we can help you we come from the Lyme Connect lens. So we come from the professional disabled viewpoint. So we can kind of walk you through, what types of considerations you might want to make, who might be the best person to talk to. We can also connect you with some of our network members who we know have had similar experiences, whether it's similar disability or the similar function that they're working in. So we're happy to connect you with folks who have lived that experience as well.
Thanks, Alyssa. And I forgot to mention at the top, but you touched on it a little bit in your answer, but I'm just going to reiterate that, during this Q&A, we're not doling out legal advice. You should absolutely consult, your specific school's career center, disability services center, or lawyer if you need any kind of guidance around your rights. But just wanted to put that out there before we get into some more of the audience questions here. I have a question that I think Evelyn also got the chance to answer in writing, but hoping you can voice over. What resources or support systems are in place for individuals with schizophrenia to help them succeed in their roles?
Oh, so we have, in terms of Lyme Connect, we are open to folks with all types of disabilities. So that's also to say that we don't necessarily have expertise in a particular type of disability. So I would say for mental health in general, there are a few different accommodations that I have either heard of or have utilized myself. So flexible scheduling is really important, particularly for anyone who utilizes medication. I know that some folks have medications that they need to take in the beginning of the day, but it does make them groggy or drowsy. So if you know that, then you can work with your manager on a flexible schedule. Maybe it's starting a little bit later in the day. So I actually don't have that experience, but I do have a flexible schedule because I'm a parent and I actually work earlier than my colleagues, and because I have to pick up my child from school. So just to say that, accommodations can be for multiple reasons. But there may be times when, it's not a flexible schedule day to day or week to week. It is also just having a conversation with your employer about, instances that may come up that make you less available to your job. And what I'll say is you always want to put yourself in the driver's seat. So showcasing that you are in control of the narrative, meaning that there may be times, and this is again, this can be for many different disabilities, whether you get flares for chronic illness, or whether there are times when things come up and you can't predict it. But what you can be is honest with your employer and say, this may come about, but what you can count on me as an employee is to be incredibly organized with my work. So whether it's me meeting deadlines ahead of schedule, or it's me having a system where you know exactly where a project has left off. So if I need to take extended time off, you know how to reallocate that time to someone else to complete the work. I will make sure that everything is in proper order, in order to be addressed. And so the team is still on track. So figuring out also what the skills you do have because of your disability, not despite your disability. Organization is one for me. So that's something that's really important to highlight to the employer as well.
That was such a great answer, Alyssa. And I know we're getting some diagnosis specific follow-up questions in the chat. We have Evelyn on the back end who's going to do some answers in writing there so that we can make space for some of the additional questions that we have to get through. We have one here that says, I have seen some companies post that they hire 7% of employees with a disability. Is that something that all companies do or just some of them?
Meaning they all post it, or they all, that's the number
I
across the
think
board?
I think that the nature of the question is more like, is this a requirement for companies at large? Is it something that a standard that all companies hold themselves to, or is this unique to that organization?
Yeah, I think that, as I mentioned, larger corporations do need to report to the federal government, so they will have that data readily available. Um, so they may post what is out there. I am not sure if it's a requirement though, to have that captured across the board. But I know, like, so Lime Connect, for instance, we serve tens of thousands of people, but we as a team are small. We are a small nonprofit. So we may not post certain data points, but we do analytics on our end to understand if we meet the industry standard. Despite our size as a nonprofit, we always want to check, where are we amongst others who work in the similar sector. So I'm sure that type of reporting is existing. It's just whether they're posting or not. You might not be able to find it publicly, but it's certainly a question you can ask. I actually think it's a great question to ask the company. Like,
Yeah.
do you have stats on how many employees you hire with X identity? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ties back into some of the answers earlier about identifying green flags and assessing whether
Mhm.
or not a company might be a good fit for you. So great question. Okay, I have another, I'm gonna kind of rapid fire here. For positions specifically looking for neurodiverse applicants, does diagnosed status come into play? Or in what situations can companies require proof of a diagnosis in order to hire or provide accommodations for invisible disabilities?
Yeah, I mean, everything is company to company, so you might encounter certain requests. Um, from my understanding, for specific like neurodiverse hiring events, I haven't seen a required documentation for that. It is more of a self-identification. However, I will say there are certain accommodations that may need documentation. So I'm thinking back to one of our network members who worked for one of our corporate partners, based on the West Coast. I think they actually started interning in New York, um, and then moved over to the West Coast and realized that they thrived in New York's city structure where it's a grid. So this person has OCD. They very much were able to organize their day and their commute by the grid structure of New York City. When they moved to the West Coast, where so much of the commute is driving, there isn't a lot of public transit, that really affected their day to day. So they requested to move back to the New York office. In that case, they did need a doctor's um, documented note stating why that would be beneficial to this individual. But a lot of other companies have just accommodation platforms where you can go on, make a request, and it's granted. I think, some companies, any employee can receive a standing desk. Any employee can have noise canceling headphones. So it does vary company to company. It's just for those that may not be as clear, human resources may request some doctor's documentation.
Thank you for that. I think we have space for one more question before we have to wrap today. I so appreciate everybody who's been asking in the Q&A box. This one talks about, I am not sure yet what my career goals should be at this point. I didn't have internship experience during undergrad, largely related to my undiagnosed health issues and neurodivergence. I'm concerned I'm not hireable for even entry-level positions because I don't have internship experience. Should I seek a paid internship at this point rather than looking for a job so that I can build experience and then be more hireable for a full-time position?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question to ask employers at this early stage of networking. So, talking at career fairs or recruitment receptions, um, it is something that is common. Folks need to take time off of school. They need to address other needs in their life and don't have time for an internship. So it's not something that's uncommon. I would see if any companies have kind of a training or apprenticeship type of option, because that can be your foot in the door of the company and have that experience. So I would see if there are any opportunities like that. I know a lot of tech companies have those types of roles, and just see what, some people are considered non-traditional students. There may be non-traditional entry level positions, and you can also prove yourself, maybe not having traditional internship experience, if perhaps you gain certifications. And I think that's actually a good thing you can do too, is go the certification route in figuring out what you might want to do. Like, there's a lot of companies that offer no or low cost certificates, and that can really build your experience even if you're not in a physical office space. I'll also do a plug for Lime Connect's brand new discovery program. It's specifically for first year students, for those who are trying to navigate their first stages of their career path. So it's for first year students. We're going to have a kickoff call and panel in October, on October 21st, and then we'll fully officially launch in the wintertime. So if you're a first year student and you're hearing all this and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I am supposed to do, I don't know where I should look, please join Lime for that program. We also have our traditional fellowship program for rising juniors, and we have a foundations program for young professionals down the line. So we're here to support you throughout your entire career process. And hopefully some of the things we shared today were a good jumping off point in answering those questions.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. This has been awesome. You got to answer so many awesome questions, but we do have to wrap things up. I know you have an additional networking event that's coming up for
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for your time and energy here today, particularly as you're battling a migraine. I really appreciate you being so gracious with your time. Everybody who is in the audience, thank you so much for being here. Please take 30 seconds to fill out our feedback survey so that Handshake can continue to bring you more awesome events in the future. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at Join Handshake for event announcements. We do have more coming up tomorrow, the next day, next week. We've got a lot of events happening,
It's the
so we wanna make
season.
sure that you're yes. So thank you so much, and we hope to have you at another event soon. We will also be sharing the recording of this session for folks who wanna reference it, come back to it, or, folks who weren't able to join for the entire session. We'll be sharing that recording on our YouTube channel and our blog later today, and we'll be emailing it around to everyone who registered for this event as well. With that, thank you all so much, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your week. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Britton.
Thank you. Bye.